Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon in late spring when everything started to unravel. Sarah had slipped out to the hardware store in their small town of Westbridge, determined to finally pick out paint swatches for the spare bedroom she'd been meaning to redecorate. She'd been talking about it for weeks, but her schedule at the advertising agency kept her too busy to act. With the house to myself, I decided to tackle some overdue chores. The living room rug was begging for proper vacuum, so I nudged the heavy sectional sofa forward to get at the dust bunnies underneath. That's when I saw it. Tucked against the baseboard, half hidden by a thin layer of dust, was a delicate silver ring. It was simple, almost understated, with a single small emerald glinting in the center. I crouched down, picked it up, and turned it over in my palm. The band was cool to the touch, and inside, I noticed a faint engraving. KL. My stomach tightened. Sarah only wore gold jewelry, bold, statement pieces that matched her vibrant personality. This ring, subtle and unassuming, wasn't hers. And KL? Those weren't her initials, nor mine. I set the ring on the kitchen counter, its emerald catching the light as I tried to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. I didn't say anything when Sarah got back, her arms full of paint swatches and a to-go cup of chai latte. She was rattling on about sage green versus dusty blue, her voice bright and distracted. I waited for the right moment, then gestured casually toward the counter. "Hey, this yours?" "Found it under the couch." Sarah's eyes flicked to the ring, and for a split second, her smile faltered. "Oh, that's odd," she said, barely pausing as she set her swatches on the table. "Must be Lisa's. She was over a while back, right? She's always wearing stuff like that." Her tone was light, but it felt rehearsed, like she'd anticipated the question. She didn't touch the ring, didn't even lean closer to inspect it. Instead, she pivoted to the paint samples, holding up two shades and asking which I liked better. I let it go, but her answer didn't sit right. Lisa hadn't been to our place since last fall, at least not that I could recall. Had it been more recent? I tried to picture it, but the timeline fell off. "Wasn't that back in October?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Sarah tilted her head, frowning like she was doing the math. "Was it? Feels like it was just a few weeks ago." "Huh," she shrugged, then changed the subject, asking if I'd taken out the recycling. Just like that, the ring was forgotten, at least in her world. But it stayed with me, a small, nagging weight in the back of my mind. Over the next few days, I left the ring on the counter, untouched. Sarah never mentioned it, never moved it. It was as if we'd made an unspoken pact to ignore it. But the silence around that little piece of silver felt louder than any argument. I started noticing things I hadn't before, or maybe I'd seen them but hadn't let myself dwell. Sarah's phone, once carelessly left on the coffee table or charging in the hallway, was now always with her, face down, notifications muted. She'd started locking the bathroom door when she showered, not always, but often enough to catch my attention. When I asked what time she'd be home from work, her answers were vague. "Late, probably. Depends on the client. Don't wait up." Her tone was breezy, but it lacked the warmth we used to share. Then there was the receipt. I was rummaging through her car one evening, looking for a pen in the glove box, when I spotted a crumpled slip of paper wedged between the passenger seat and the center console. It was a parking receipt from a garage in Riverton, a town about 40 minutes south of Westbridge. The date was 2 days earlier. I stared at it, puzzled. Sarah's office was in the opposite direction, and we didn't know anyone in Riverton. No friends, no family, no reason for her to be there. When she came out to the garage to grab her gym bag, I held up the receipt, keeping my tone light. "You were in Riverton this week?" She froze for a moment, then laughed a little too sharply. "Riverton? Oh yeah, that was a last-minute thing. Had to meet a supplier at some coffee shop there." She busied herself with her bag, avoiding my eyes. "Thought your suppliers were mostly local," I said, still casual. "They usually are. This one's not." Her voice had an edge, a subtle signal to back off. So I did, at least outwardly. But inside, I was starting to collect pieces, small, unconnected fragments that didn't yet form a picture but felt like they might. By the end of the week, I was paying closer attention. I didn't confront her, didn't accuse her of anything. I just watched. The ring still sat on the counter, a silent question neither of us would touch. Sarah's routines hadn't changed on the surface. She still hummed while making coffee, still left her shoes by the door. But there was a distance in her now, a guardedness I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe I had, and I'd been too comfortable to question it. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, I realized I needed answers. Not just about the ring, but about the gaps in her stories, the locked doors, the receipts that didn't add up. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was curious, maybe even a little afraid. But more than anything, I was awake. And once you start seeing the cracks, there's no going back to sleep. The ring stayed on the counter for another week, a silent sentinel in our kitchen. Sarah never touched it, never mentioned it, and I didn't bring it up again. But its presence lingered, like a low hum you only notice when the house goes quiet. I started keeping track of things, small details I might have overlooked before. It wasn't obsession, not yet, just a need to understand what was shifting beneath the surface of our life in Westbridge. I began with her car. Every morning, while Sarah was still in the shower, I'd slip out to the garage and check the odometer. Her commute to the agency was a predictable 12 miles round trip. Most days, the numbers lined up. But twice that week, the mileage was off. Once by 25 miles, another by 38. She'd mentioned nothing about detours or errands, just the usual client meetings or late nights at the office. I jotted the numbers in a note on my phone, telling myself it was just data, not evidence. Sarah worked in advertising, managing campaigns, and coordinating with vendors. I'd always tuned out the details. Her world of deadlines and creative briefs felt like background noise to our life together. But now I started listening. She'd mentioned strategy sessions, over lunch, meetings that hadn't existed a few months ago. I didn't ask questions, not directly. Instead, I turned to the iPad we used to share, the one she'd abandoned for a newer laptop. It was still logged into her accounts, untouched for months. Her email was clean, just work stuff and newsletters. But her calendar was another story. There were recurring lunch meetings blocked off, always at the same time, always vague. No client names, no details, just lunch downtown. I cross-referenced the dates with her odometer notes. 2 of those lunches matched the days with extra mileage. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a thread worth pulling. I ordered a small voice recorder online, a discreet device no bigger than a key fob. When it arrived, I tucked it behind a row of old marketing books on the shelf in our home office, where Sarah worked remotely a couple of days a week. The first recording was a bust, nothing but the clack of her keyboard and the occasional sip from her coffee mug. I almost gave up on it, but 3 days later, she worked from home again. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I retrieved the recorder and played it back. Most of it was mundane, a Zoom call with her team, some muttering about a deadline. But then, around noon, her phone rang, and she put on speaker. A man's voice came through, warm and familiar. "Hey you, miss you already." Sarah laughed, a soft, intimate sound I hadn't heard in months. "You just saw me," she teased. My chest tightened, but I kept listening. The call lasted 7 minutes. They talked about a new wine bar in Riverton, a mutual friend named Marcus, and how Marcus, needed to be careful calling because he's starting to notice. That was me. I stopped the recording, my thumb hovering over the play button. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I saved the file, labeled it Office_3, and slipped the recorder back into its hiding spot. When Sarah came home that evening, carrying a bag of takeout from her favorite Thai place, she was all smiles. "Got your spicy noodles," she said, setting the bag on the counter, right next to the ring. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks." That night, I couldn't sleep. The man's voice, Marcus, kept replaying in my head, smooth and confident, saying her name like it belonged to him. I needed more than audio. I needed something tangible, something I could hold up to the light. The next day, while Sarah was out meeting a friend, I dug out her old laptop from the hallway closet. It was a clunky thing she'd used when she freelanced before the agency job. I plugged it in, watched the screen flicker to life. The password hadn't changed. The desktop was chaos, folders named Client Work 2022, and miscellaneous ideas scattered everywhere. I opened her browser, half expecting nothing. But her Facebook was still logged in, and a messenger icon showed an unread thread. I clicked it. The name at the top was Marcus. The conversation stretched back weeks, maybe months. It wasn't just friendly chatter. There were flirty exchanges, nicknames, references to last Tuesday and that spot by the river. I scrolled until I found a photo. Sarah, in my old college sweatshirt, curled up next to a man on our couch. Our couch, the same one I'd moved to find the ring. My pulse didn't race. I didn't feel the hot rush of anger I'd expected. Instead, a cold clarity settled in. I kept scrolling. Another photo, this one in our kitchen, Sarah holding a wine glass, Marcus leaning against the counter. The timestamps matched nights she'd said she was working late, stuck in a meeting, or grabbing drinks with her team. Then I saw a message that stopped me cold. Marcus wrote, "Still thinking about Wednesday. Can't believe we got away with it." Sarah replied, "I know. He was back like 20 minutes after you left." She'd brought him here. Not to a hotel, not to some neutral ground, but to our home, our space. The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in the audacity, the way she'd woven him into the fabric of our life while I was none the wiser. I took screenshots of the messages, the photos, the damning proof, and saved them to a USB drive. Then I closed the laptop, my movements slow and deliberate, like I was sealing a vault. When Sarah got home that night, she was humming, kicking off her sneakers, and pouring herself a glass of wine. "Good day?" she asked, glancing at me as she leaned against the counter. I nodded, watching her. She looked so at ease, so untouched by the weight of what I'd found. For her, nothing had changed. But for me, the world had tilted. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I needed to be sure, to let the pieces settle. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept beside me, I knew one thing for certain. The life we'd built was a house of cards, and I'd just found the first one to pull. What came next would depend on how deep the lies went and whether I was ready to face them. The screenshots on the USB drive felt like a loaded gun in my pocket, but I kept them there untouched for days. Sarah went about her routine, mornings with coffee, evenings with takeout, her laughter filling the house like nothing was wrong. The ring still sat on the counter, a dusty emerald glinting under the kitchen lights, ignored by both of us. But the silence between us was growing, not in words, but in the spaces where trust used to be. I wasn't ready to confront her, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to know how far this went, how much of our life in Westbridge was a lie. I kept up my quiet investigation. The voice recorder stayed hidden behind the books in the office, capturing fragments of Sarah's work-from-home days. Most were useless, client calls, the hum of her laptop fan, but one recording caught a second conversation with Marcus. It was brief, just 3 minutes, but it was enough. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice low and intimate. Sarah's reply was softer, almost hesitant. "We need to be careful. He's been quieter lately." My jaw tightened as I listened, but I didn't stop the playback. They made plans to meet again, somewhere in Riverton, at a place called the Lantern. I noted the date and time, then saved the file. The odometer checks continued, too. Another day, another 30 miles unaccounted for. I cross-referenced it with her calendar. Another lunch meeting, no details. I didn't ask her about it. Instead, I started digging deeper into the laptop. I hadn't touched it since finding the Facebook messages, but now I went back, combing through her browser history. Most of it was work-related, vendor sites, campaign analytics, but one link stood out. A confirmation email for a hotel booking in Riverton, dated for a night she'd told me she was at a team dinner. I added a screenshot of the email to the USB, my mental folder of evidence growing heavier. By now, I was moving through our house like a ghost, watching Sarah with a detachment I didn't recognize in myself. She'd notice, sometimes, her eyes lingering on me when I didn't respond to her jokes or when I stayed silent at dinner. "You okay?" she'd ask, her tone light but probing. "Just tired," I'd say, and she'd let it drop. But I could see the flicker of unease in her face, like she knew I was pulling away, even if she didn't know why. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening, and Sarah was out running errands. I was home alone, restless, the weight of what I knew pressing against me. I went back to the laptop, opened her messenger again. The thread with Marcus had new messages. I scrolled through, my eyes catching on a single line from him. "You sure he doesn't suspect anything? You've been weird about it." Sarah's response was short. "He's clueless." "Don't worry." My breath caught, not from shock, but from the cold finality of it. Clueless. That's what she thought of me. That's how she justified it. I kept reading. There was another photo, this one recent, taken at the Lantern. Sarah was laughing, her hair loose, Marcus's arms slung casually around her shoulders. The date matched one of her late nights. Below the photo, a message from Marcus, "Tell me you're not falling for me." Her reply, "Too late." I stared at the screen, the words burning into me. This wasn't just a fling. This was something deeper, something she'd chosen over me, over us. I printed the worst of it, the hotel confirmation, the photo at the Lantern, the message calling me clueless. I didn't need everything, just enough to make it undeniable. I slipped the pages into a plain manila envelope and set it on the kitchen table, right where the ring still sat. The envelope looked stark against the wood, a quiet declaration I wasn't sure I was ready to make. But I was done pretending, done letting her lies rewrite my reality. Sarah got home late that night, close to 10 p.m. I heard the crunch of her tires on the gravel driveway, slower than usual, like she was stalling. She came in with a paper bag from the diner down the street, her smile practiced. "Got those burgers you like," she said, setting the bag on the counter. Her eyes flicked to the envelope on the table, then back to me. "What's that?" I nodded toward it. "Take a look." She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the bag before she set it down. She walked to the table, opened the envelope, and pulled out the pages. Her movements were deliberate, but I saw the tremor in her hands. First, the hotel confirmation, then the photo of her and Marcus at the Lantern. Finally, the screenshot of her message. "He's clueless." Her face didn't change, but her shoulders stiffened, like she was bracing for a blow. "Are you kidding me?" she said, her voice sharp, defensive. "You went through my stuff? You brought him here," I said, my tone even. "Into our house. Our life." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. "You lied to me for months. You made me question myself, my memory, everything. And you call me clueless." Her arms crossed, her jaw tight. "You don't get it, Tom. You were never here. Not really. Always in your own head, working on your projects, shutting me out. I was lonely. So you cheated," I said, not a question. "It wasn't like that," she snapped, but her voice cracked. "It wasn't about him. It was about me needing something else." I stared at her, the woman I'd built a life with, now standing in our kitchen like a stranger. "He was in our house, Sarah. You don't get to rewrite that." She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting to the ring on the counter, then back to the envelope. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't want you to say anything," I said. "Your bag's by the door. Just the essentials." Her eyes widened. "You're kicking me out?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "You already left. I'm just making it official." She stood there, frozen, like she hadn't expected me to draw a line. "I didn't think you'd actually do this," she said, almost a whisper. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She grabbed her keys, her purse, and the bag by the door, casting one last look at the envelope before walking out. The door clicked shut, and the house fell silent. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Sarah had always been good at spinning stories, and I knew she wouldn't let this one end without trying to rewrite it. What came next would test me in ways I wasn't prepared for, and the cracks in her carefully crafted facade were only beginning to show. The house was too quiet after Sarah left. Not lonely, just still, like the air itself was holding its breath. The manila envelope sat on the kitchen table for another day, the ring beside it, both untouched. I didn't feel the need to gloat or grieve. Not yet. I was still processing, still piecing together the man I'd been before the ring and the one I was becoming now. But Sarah wasn't done with the story, and I knew it. She'd always had a knack for shaping narratives, and I braced myself for what came next. 3 days later, it arrived. A post on her Instagram, A moody black and white shot of her sitting by a window, coffee cup in hand, hair artfully messy. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to break free to find yourself. Here's to new beginnings and owning your truth." Growth freedom, the comments poured in fast. "You're so brave, Sarah. Proud of you for choosing you. Toxic relationships don't define you." I read each one, my jaw tight. To her followers, I was the villain, the unnamed shadow she'd escaped. She didn't mention me directly, but the subtext was clear. I was the cage, the weight she'd shed to soar. A few friends texted, their messages cautious. "Hey, saw Sarah's post. You okay?" Didn't see that coming. I replied the same way each time. "I'm fine." Things change. I didn't mention Marcus, the hotel, or the photos of them on our couch. If they wanted the truth, they'd have to ask for it. No one did. The silence from our shared circle stung, but it wasn't surprising. Sarah had always been the charismatic one, the one who drew people in. I was the steady one, the background to her spotlight. Now, she was using that light to rewrite our ending. But then came Rachel. We'd worked together years ago on a freelance project, a brief overlap that left an impression. There'd been a moment back then. Nothing serious, just a playful comment she'd made, a smile I hadn't returned because I was married. I filed it away, a what-if that never went anywhere. Under Sarah's post, Rachel left a comment. "Growth is real, but so is accountability." Just saying. It was short, sharp, no likes, no replies. But it stayed up. A day later, another comment appeared, this one from a mutual acquaintance. "This feels like half the story. What's missing?" That one vanished within hours, but I saw it. The cracks in Sarah's narrative were starting to show. Her account went quiet after that. No new posts, no stories. A week later, it went private. I wasn't surprised. She controlled the story until it started to fray. And when it did, she retreated. That told me more about her than any apology could. Lies, I realized, were fragile things, crumbling under the slightest scrutiny. I didn't sit idle. I boxed up the rest of her stuff. Her favorite scarf, the novel she'd left on the nightstand, the ceramic mug she used for her morning tea. I didn't destroy anything, didn't leave a note. I dropped the boxes at a storage unit near her brother's place in Riverton and texted her the access code. No reply, which was fine. I was done waiting for her to acknowledge me. I rearranged the living room, not to erase her, but to reclaim it. The couch went against a different wall, the rug got a deep clean. I took the ring from the counter and slipped it into an envelope, dropping it in a donation bin at the community center. It wasn't about closure. It was about letting go of a question I no longer needed answered. I started running again, a habit I'd abandoned years ago. The early mornings in Westbridge were crisp, the streets lined with budding maples. I signed up for a coding course I've been putting off, something to keep my mind sharp. I ate dinner at a dive bar a few times a week, the kind with sticky tables and a jukebox that only played songs from the 80s. No one knew my story there, and I liked it that way. Then, one evening, I ran into Rachel. It was at a used bookstore downtown, the kind with creaky floors and shelves that smelled of old paper. We locked eyes across a display of dog-eared mysteries. "Tom," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "It's been a minute." "Rachel," I said, nodding. "Yeah, it has." We talked for a bit, safe topics like the best coffee in town and whether the new bookstore cafe was worth the hype. As I turned to leave, she stopped me, her voice lower now. "I saw her post," she said, "and I knew you weren't the problem. Just wanted you to know." I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't need to. She'd seen through Sarah's story, maybe because she'd known me, even briefly, or maybe because she recognized the careful curation of a lie. "Thanks," I said. "That means a lot." I left the bookstore with a paperback I didn't need and a strange sense of lightness. Not vindication, not relief, just the quiet assurance that I wasn't invisible. Someone had seen me, and that was enough. A few days later, Rachel and I grabbed coffee. It wasn't a date, not exactly, but it wasn't just catching up either. We talked about work, old projects, the way life twists when you least expect it. One coffee became two, then a dinner the next week. It wasn't a rebound or a replacement. It was just honest, unburdened by pretense. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But Sarah wasn't gone, not entirely. Her shadow lingered, and I knew she'd reach out eventually. When she did, it would force me to decide who I was now. Not the man who'd found the ring, not the one who'd been called clueless, but the one who'd walked through the wreckage and was still standing. That choice was coming, and it would define everything. The weeks after Sarah's Instagram post felt like a new chapter, one I was writing for myself. Westbridge, with its quiet streets and familiar rhythms, became a canvas for rebuilding. I kept running in the mornings, the cool air sharpening my focus. The coding course I'd enrolled in was challenging but grounding, each completed module a small victory. Rachel and I met up a few more times, dinner at a taco joint, a walk through the town's autumn festival. It wasn't rushed or forced. It was just two people finding their way towards something real. But I knew Sarah's silence wouldn't last forever. She'd always needed the last word, and I was waiting for it. It came 4 weeks later, a text that lit up my phone in the middle of a quiet evening. "Can we meet? Just to talk. Please." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her fade into the past where she belonged. But another part, the part that had once loved her, built a life with her, needed to see this through, to close the door for good. I waited a day, not to play games, but to be sure I was ready. Then I replied, "Fine. Name the place." We met at a small cafe on the edge of Westbridge, a neutral spot with no memories tied to it. Sarah was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She wore a sweater I recognized, one I'd given her for Christmas years ago. Her hair was pulled back, her face bare of makeup, like she was trying to look like the Sarah I'd known before the ring, before Marcus. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice soft, almost fragile. I nodded, sitting across from her. "What do you want to talk about?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the mug. I didn't expect things to end like that. I've been thinking a lot, and I owe you an apology. A real one." I leaned back, studying her. "Go on." "I messed up," she said, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. "I wasn't honest with you, and I hurt you. I got caught up in something, someone, and I didn't know how to stop it. But I never meant for it to destroy us. You brought him into our home," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You lied to my face for months. You called me clueless. That wasn't an accident, Sarah." Her face tightened, but she didn't look away. "I know. I was lost. You were always so steady, so focused, and I felt like I was fading in your shadow. Marcus was a mistake, but he made me feel seen." I let her words hang there, the weight of them familiar but hollow. "You could have talked to me," I said. "You could have told me you were unhappy. Instead, you built a whole other life behind my back." She looked down at her tea, her shoulders slumping. "I didn't know how, and then it was too late. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Tom. I don't want you to hate me." "I don't hate you," I said, and I meant it. "But I don't trust you, and I'm not the guy who's going to try to fix this. That version of me is gone." Her eyes flickered with something, regret, maybe, or surprise. "You've changed," she said quietly. "I had to," I replied. "You didn't leave me much choice." She nodded, like she'd expected that answer, but hoped for another. "What happens now?" "I filed for divorce," I said. "You'll hear from my lawyers soon. That's the last step." Her breath caught, but she didn't argue. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Tom." "I already have," I said, not with malice, but with certainty. I stood, left a few bills on the table for the coffee I hadn't touched, and walked out. I didn't look back. That was the real ending. Not the night she left, not her carefully curated Instagram post, not even the apology she'd finally mustered. It was the moment I chose myself over her story, clarity over chaos. The air outside the cafe was crisp, the Westbridge sky streaked with the first hints of sunset. I felt lighter, not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped fighting a battle that was never mine to begin with. A week later, I saw Rachel at the bookstore again, this time on purpose. We'd planned to meet, to browse and grab dinner after. She smiled when she saw me, that easy, unguarded smile that felt like a gift. "Good day," she asked, pulling a novel from the shelf. "Better now," I said, and we both laughed. It wasn't a grand gesture or a declaration. It was just a moment, honest and unburdened, the kind I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Sarah's boxes stayed in the storage unit. Her Instagram stayed private. The mutual friends who'd texted stopped reaching out, and I let them go too. The house in Westbridge was mine now, not because I'd erased her, but because I'd filled it with my own choices, new furniture, new routines, new possibilities. The ring was gone, donated to someone who'd never know its story. And I was here, not starting over, but starting true. That night, as I sat on the couch with Rachel, a movie playing in the background, I realized something. The cracks I'd found hadn't broken me. They'd let the light in. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to see what it revealed.